Thanks, Berlin, and hello from London. I'm very excited being part of this finale of the Europe Talks here in London. And we are here in the library of the Goethe Institute in South Kensington on famous Exhibition Road. And I'm very excited to tell you a little more about this space. But first, I want to hand over to my partner here, Ross, from the Daily Mirror.
The Daily Mirror and the Express are two of the most diametrically opposed newspapers in the UK. The Mirror supported Remain, the Daily Express supported Brexit, but we know that this disagreement is paralysing our politics and we have to find a way to communicate better with each other. So that's why we're really proud to be part of Europe Talks for the second year running, and why we're really happy to be at the Goethe Institute today and involving ourselves with the Seat 12 artwork. As Goethe himself said, with knowledge, doubt increases.
What a wonderful quote. Well, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about this artwork here, what you can see. It's Seat number 12 by German artist Jenny Brockmann. And it's very, very exciting because Jenny always works not only with material, her art also works only when there are people involved. And I would like to quote her. Seat number 12 creates a seating opportunity for 12 people, referring to a circular conference table layout. The construction touches the floor in only one place, meaning that the 12 aluminium branches, which start in the middle and each conclude with a seat cushion, create dangerous tipping motions as soon as one tries to sit down. The interrelatedness between participants, their communication and unwillingness to reposition for a collective balance become part of the installation. The seemingly futuristic object deals with communication, a voiced or perhaps merely sensed discourse on the perfect balance inevitably evolves between those seated. So we are very excited now when we have our discussant coming to this seat and trying to balance out their discussion. Once they're seated, there will be part of the artwork, there will be an artwork themselves. So I'm really curious what will happen.
Me too.
Please choose your seat, but please be careful, you have to negotiate with somebody, with all of you.
I think it's probably based on if you think seesaw's weight.
Yeah.
I think so.
So please find your opposite, otherwise
I'm judging from appearance.
I'm judging from what I see in the mirror.
Do you want to maybe try?
Shall we try to sit?
Yes, and then we'll sit at the same time.
Tom's not that one, you can't sit there.
Is it next to me?
Yes.
I think, yes.
I can sit in opposite my Polish compatriot.
Or next to it.
I think you should sit there, and because you know we're kind of the same size and shape. And
Yeah.
maybe
Was there a balance?
I think so. I think so.
That's
what I'm
guessing.
Is that going to be balanced?
Yeah.
Somebody has to
Don't you think it
be a
would?
spat.
Maybe you should be sitting opposite Ada then, as in balance, and me and me opposite Thomas.
Should we stop placing?
Well, should we just try first? You know what I mean? Just let's try and see. We are just guessing here.
Yeah.
All right.
Get your leg over.
Get your leg over. Very good.
Oh!
Actually,
Actually, that's not too bad. I think I weigh more than you, and I like this.
I don't know.
So we're here to discuss, hopefully in a slightly different way, as this subject has been aired for quite several years at this point. Was Brexit worth it?
So hi everyone, I'm Sadia Barber. I voted Brexit. When the EU started as a project, there was about 6 countries. It went on to 12, and by the end of it was 27. And like anyone who's got to sell their own business, you can have rules and regulations at the start as a startup, but as you grow and expand, you need the time to go back and reevaluate and see, are they still applicable? And I just felt that wasn't happening.
I voted Remain in the referendum. I do think Brexit was a mistake. I don't think it's going too well. I think when we look at the empty shelves, we were never told that these things would be in short demand. That wasn't part of the kind of Brexit story.
It's a philosophical mistake for me to close doors, to erect borders where there used to be none. And this is particularly because I'm from South Asia, which has suffered from the problem of borders.
It took me 10 minutes at the polling station to vote for Brexit, even though I'd obviously been campaigning for it with the Daily Express throughout the referendum. But now it would take me 2 seconds to vote for Brexit. Everything I've seen, of course there will be bumps in the road. Change always brings bumps in the road. But for me, the attraction of Brexit was not, as has been portrayed, to throw up borders. It was actually to open up to the rest of the world, and we're seeing that with the trade deals, with reaching out to India, back to places like Australia and New Zealand already, South America.
So David, sorry, you were talking about this perceived dichotomy between being in Europe and looking out to the rest of the world. And when you were enumerating the countries that Britain was now reaching out to, there was a telling slip when you said we're looking back to Australia, and you mentioned India. And for me, this is really quite a dangerous way of replicating an imperial vision.
Well, I also mentioned Brazil.
Those first two already made me understand that there's a subconscious driver of imperialism, the greatness of empire that was once lost. I don't see why relations with Brazil and Chile, etc., cannot continue while remaining part of the EU. Within that mix, to single out the so-called Commonwealth nations, for me, betrays another element in the underlying desire for Brexit, which for me is dangerous.
Sorry, can I just step in there? I kind of listened to what David said. I didn't pick up any of the imperialism. It was the fact that actually there were so many restrictions in terms of preference. Your default has to be to Europe, whether it's for kind of employment, whether it's for trade, etc., before you can start going elsewhere. We don't have those infringements now.
For starters, I have an Italian connection as well, funnily enough. My wife is Italian. That's one of the reasons it took me 10 minutes to actually work out how I was going to vote. This nonsense, I'm afraid, about saying that we all want to return to the British Empire. The European Union is a fortress. It has a thing called the Customs Union, which stopped us from having trade deals, proper trade deals with other countries. It stopped us from having immigration deals with other countries.
People in this country don't want to be part of a conglomeration of nation states with a dictatorial element. I mean, we saw how they treated Greece. We see how they treat the African migrants that are trying to cross the channel. I wouldn't want to be part of an organisation that is like that. And I think with a progressive government, we could have got a more bespoke deal where we could have had an inclusive Brexit where it would have worked for European people and British people, and we can effectively allocate our resources. I don't think it's one or the other. I think both can exist, but I think people are misdirecting their anger at people who have nothing to do with the situation of the UK, and I think that is the problem.
David, actually, one of the most attractive aspects of Britain is its soft power. As a hard power, it's not on the same level as Americans, for example. As a soft power, it is absolutely universally praised as the most attractive country, starting with the language, starting with its culture, pop culture, music, history, Shakespeare, and so forth. That is a predominant reason why the Germans are so unhappy about Brexit, because they love Britain sometimes more than some of the Brexiteers love their own country. We feel akin to this attractiveness, and we thrive on British things. German television would be nothing without BBC input and other English language programs and so forth. And so it is not the empire which Britain looks back to, it's the sovereign idea. Sovereignty has acquired an importance which is beyond its real value. As I said about China, Germany's trade with China. We are a sovereign nation, although enmeshed in the EU, and we have sovereign economic development with China. Yes, it may be a bit slower than if you do these trade deals or yourself, but it's not prohibiting it. We can be both a member of the EU and develop healthy economic relations.
Can I just say that I was noticing that John was looking very depressed in this conversation, and I was wondering
I don't see the value in these. There are so many
philosophical more
there are so
than
many factual inaccuracies. If you wanted, you'd take an hour to unpick them all. There was a brief moment around the millennium when I dared to hope that this country was going to start, for the first time, understanding that it's rooted in common values. I also don't respect Remainers who try to convince me that actually it'll all be fine. When Brexit happened, oh, don't worry, it'll be a sort of soft Brexit, it'll be a good Brexit, all the antagonisms would go away, Britain wouldn't be this sort of country where you sort of sit in the bathtub waving your flag and singing Rule Britannia. It'll be a different, open country. None of this has come to pass. But frankly, if that's what people want, I'm part of the older generation, and if that's what you younger generation, because the older generation is much less relevant now, if that's genuinely what you want for your country, where you see French people busking in Portugal, doing graffiti art in Sweden, that's, to me, lovely. That's brilliant.
Can I say something? Okay, so I don't understand what really is the problem. I don't think any of those things you've highlighted are going to change, as in, you know, the Britain you described. Okay, so I don't understand what the issue is. Things change and things need to change, don't they? Everybody's talking about their own reality here. I'm homeless. Okay, now I'm homeless. All right, so the fact that we are not in the EU, for me, hopefully, means things were going to get better. Means that hopefully, because, you know, this was this doomsday, that basically we're all going to be leaving on the boats and planes, and they were all going. That's not true. Because if you come where I live, every single city council property that becomes available goes to an EU citizen. Why is that? Why is that?
I know that John is a city councillor in Manchester, where we have a lot of these issues, and maybe, John, what do you think the reason is that people can't get on the housing list?
We're not building any council housing.
Can I just ask you, how much is the housing shortage in Manchester, from your experience, due to Britain's membership of the European Union?
Well, you know, EU citizens aren't at the top of the list in Manchester. I don't know if it's the case in Nottingham. I genuinely don't know. But in Manchester, that's not the case. It's obviously veterans, it's families, it's people who are vulnerable. Those are the people that are at the top of the list. It's not based on your nationality or anything like that.
I'm vulnerable. I'm vulnerable, being homeless.
How is that the fault of the European Union?
That I'm not saying it's the fault, and if I said it was the fault, I said it's part of the issue, didn't I?
I think Giselle's main point is about resource. It's like it's managing. So when you're not part of the kind of EU and you can manage the resource, so it's about headcount.
But people need to get a hold of themselves and sort themselves out. You can't blame the government. You can't blame Tom, Dick or Harry. People need to have a bit of dignity and pride in themselves. Look for a job. All right, well, no jobs are not easy to come by, but they have to. You can't be spoon-fed all the time, and people rely too much on benefits instead of sorting themselves out.
Because I agree, we Brexiteers need to stop blaming Europe for everything, but also actually Remainers need to stop blaming Brexit for everything. And actually the one thing I really liked about Brexit was actually we could stop blaming the Europeans. We could stop having our governments and civil servants saying, well, it's the EU, we would do it, but it's the EU. Now it's up to them, and they've got to deliver.
That now you're out of the EU, you have only yourself to blame if things don't succeed. You really have to make the most of it, out of your own current affairs, and no longer to blame anything on anyone else. That is it.
I think people in general should stop blaming everybody else and talk to one another.
So I just wanted to ask one question from you about how do you think people in Poland have viewed Brexit?
From the people I know, well, I guess for a lot of Polish people took this as an opportunity to come back because they just didn't feel welcome anymore. So that's, I guess, the emotional side, and the other side is, of course, also the economical one and just the lack of security. Am I allowed to stay? Should I buy a house here? Will I be able to live here in 5 years? So I guess, I mean, that's what we are seeing as well, right? Just many people left because just they didn't feel like they have a future here.
Do you think Poland will leave the EU?
I hope they won't. I really hope they won't. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? But maybe we've learned from Britain. In that way, maybe it's a good thing we've learned.
Any ideas about how we can talk to each other better?
Yeah, I mean, just looking around or listening around to what people have been saying, a lot of people have described themselves as patriotic, loving the country, and that's all similarities that I think a lot of us have. I certainly want to believe in Britain, and I love my country. I identify as a Manc Briton and then a European. I certainly will work with every single community, regional, national government to make sure that we succeed as a country.
I remember when COVID kicked off, we live in a development in which there is social housing, and we were aware that there were a lot of our neighbours who had been made redundant, didn't have jobs, were really scrambling. So we thought, okay, since we can't do the big parties we do with our families and kind of thing, let's use that funding and actually have a nice Saturday meal. And I put a Facebook post on, just said, look, if anyone could help. And all I was looking was for chefs and cooks to help me do the cooking. And actually, I was inundated with so much money that I didn't know what to do with it. And this is from Indians, from English people, from Catholics, from Jews. It showed that when we work together, we work really well. And that is what we have to remember, the things that we have in common. And that is the Britain I want my kids to live in and be proud of, that you can be Pakistani, you can be British, and you can be a European. Just because I'm not in the EU, I'm still part of Europe, and I'm still a citizen that's actively contributing. And that is what we should be proud of, the common human values that we have.
Thank you. I'm going to bring that to a close. We're going to exit the artwork, and I'll let you lead that. I'll just.
We all have to get up together.
We have to, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you to everyone for such a lively and well-balanced discussion. You were all great artists, and thanks so much from the Daily Mirror and the Daily Express for including us in this year's Europe Talks.
Thank you, Russ. And thank you, Europe, for listening, and keep on talking. Auf Wiedersehen aus London, and I hand back to Berlin.